like, oh.
That is a tough scene. It's like you can't wait. You can't wait for the minute and a half. I don't know.
I got to be honest. I just did it 4 minutes ago. We had a 5-minute break. I had to call to check on the kids.
Yeah.
So as I was walking in, I put the phone in my pocket and was talking.
Now that's a reasonable move, but people are holding it in one hand.
No, you don't hold it in
it happens
hand.
a lot.
You just pop it in your pocket and you keep talking. And now I always check. If you walk in and somebody's doing some business, you hang up. You just say, "I'll call you later." Like you can't have any.
It's common.
A soundtrack going on in the background.
I don't know what's happening to people.
I think it is. You know what it is though. Everyone's so attached to their phones, including myself. I just admitted I did it 5 minutes ago. But you only have a window to do that. Like if you need to make a phone call, but you also need to take a leak, what do?
Or a quick Insta scroll, maybe check TikTok.
Well,
the latest
there's a
on
difference
that.
between if you're,
That's what these people are doing.
I guess what it is. I have a problem with it, but I'm guilty of it. I think we're guilty of it in society. That's just how it is.
Yeah, indeed. Darren Dreger is going to join us in a couple of moments. What did you make of Jonathan Marchessault being the Conn Smythe Trophy winner? I believe there were 18 voters, 13 of whom voted for Marchessault, 5 of whom voted for Jack Eichel. Right call, Noodles?
Yeah, I think so. It just what it is, and people were talking about Aiden Hill too. Aiden Hill played like 15 games. Marchessault, if you look at his last 15 games, he had 23 points. Oof. So that's 13 goals, 23 points. Like it's up on the screen right
bridge. Now. Like what an unbelievable graphic right there.
Great grab right there.
Impressive.
But he was quiet, obviously, the first 7 games, but he went on a tear when it mattered. So I was fine with it. Could I have been in the moment and given it to Mark Stone? Could I have been in the moment and, Jack Eichel had 3 primary assists as well? The crazy part is that's how good this team was. There was 5 or 6 guys that you could circle and go, yeah, I could see that guy winning. I love Alex Pietrangelo. I think that guy was an absolute warrior in the playoffs. Yes,
monster.
He got an absolute monster. Taking a beating, giving it out, he's chippy, but a good type of chippy. He gets under your skin, but man, is he a player.
And goal totals, I think it really influences people. And his combined totals are impressive. 25 points in a playoff run. I don't care who you are or what you look like. That's an impressive total. But the one series that I brought up last night that kind of gets put on the back burner because it's a couple of series ago, when Draisaitl and McDavid were going nuts against Vegas and they were unstoppable, Marchessault was the answer. He had 2-goal games, a hat trick in the elimination game. He was the response for the Vegas Golden Knights, right. And it was incredible to watch. So, that was big for them. And I know people that are voting for the Conn Smythe winner, they're not thinking, oh yeah, that Edmonton series. But if you go back and look at his production in that series, in the timeliness of the goals and the importance of his goal scoring, man, that's some pretty big deal stuff.
He had a hat trick in the second period against Edmonton. I think it was like a natural hat trick or something ridiculous like that. Where
where the other 2 guys were teeing off and Vegas needed a response, and it was him.
Well, think of back. Draisaitl scored 4 goals, and they lost that game.
We forget what Draisaitl had done. Remember, Marchessault finished with 13 goals.
He tied Draisaitl, who's been done for a month.
Yeah, Draisaitl's been in Germany for 4 weeks.
It's crazy. But, that being said, there's people that woke up in Edmonton saying that Edmonton got 2 games off of Vegas, which nobody else did. Nobody else was able to get. And, they were at a pivotal game where they were tied 2-2, and then Vegas took over. But ultimately, I think Vegas was the best team. They deserved it. And they woke up champions today. Good for them.
Joining us now on the Maple Toyota hotline is our hockey insider, Darren Dreger. Good evening, Darren. What's going on?
Well, I'm just kind of trying to process this. So I got to deal with you on Monday and Friday mornings, and now I'm dealing with you on OverDrive.
Yeah.
That's an AK overload. That's what that is.
Yeah, it's not OverDrive. It's overload of me. Yeah. But, apparently you do, Darren. Well, we'll make the best of it, the best of what we can. And as we've been talking about the Conn Smythe and Marchessault winning, you didn't have any issue with that decision, did you?
I didn't. Look, and knows this because I said it on one of the pregame hits. The evil quizmaster drove into our heads years ago that goals matter above everything else. And it wasn't just the number of goals that Marchessault scored. It was the timing of those goals, like the tying goals, the go-ahead goals, the game-winning goals. And on top of that, I mean, he generated offense. The point totals were there in general. So I felt like he had the edge going into Game 5. However, honorable mention to those who were clearly in the chase. I thought that our good pal Dave Poulin did an admirable job of trying to sell Mark Stone pregame Game 5. And I think if he'd got going earlier in the playoffs, he would have had a legit chance. I mean, the heart and soul aspect, it matters. It for sure does. I like Jack Eichel's game from beginning to end and just how he evolved as a hockey player. But I do think that the 18 people that voted in the end got it right with Marchessault.
Dregs, what did you make of Paul Maurice's media afterwards in the laundry list of what was going on with the group on the other end?
Yeah, I mean, that was something, right? Like just him acknowledging openly the list of significant injuries from Ekblad, and I mean, he had multiple problems. Obviously, the fractured sternum to Matthew Tkachuk was shocking. I think most of us thought that it was a dislocated shoulder, something along those lines. Go down the list. Duclair, Bennett, I mean, it was just ridiculous, the amount of stuff that the Florida Panthers had to deal with. And, that's hit or miss on an annual basis, right? I've covered many Stanley Cup finals on premises, on site, on ice, where you're interviewing these guys and they'll whisper and say, geez, this guy had such and such, whatever. But not every year do you get the team that loses to automatically offer that up, because it's a very private and confidential matter, right? I mean, some players don't want that information out there. I think that Paul did that just to acknowledge that it wasn't 5 games in the Stanley Cup final. It was what these men played through dating back to round 1 against the Boston Bruins. And, he's a wordsmith. There's no doubt about that. But I think more than ever, we've seen him kind of pour his heart and show his honesty. And I wasn't really surprised at how eloquent he was post-game either. He'd given that some thought, obviously, going into that game.
Darren, we talk about copycat, the idea of the copycat. It's one of the cliches we love tossing around. But to actually see Vegas lift the cup with how they were built and the big D man, do you honestly think any general manager or executive would have watched that and just say, you know what, make an honest assessment and say, we need to just do things a little bit differently, get a little bit bigger, and maybe that skillish defenseman that you had plugged in, maybe not a part of the plans anymore?
Yeah, I wonder, though, it makes sense, but, did Vegas copy the Tampa Bay Lightning to some degree? Not with the size of the defense. I mean, the defense of the Vegas Golden Knights, as Ray Ferraro likes to refer to them, as a stand of trees back there. And they were mobile and they were able to do so many different things. But Julian Brisebois is a very aggressive general manager. I mean, look at the number of deals that he pulled off where you're looking at the cap of the Lightning and you're going, how did they do that? So good teams with real solid cores find a way. They just do. The salary cap is nothing more than a hindrance. It's something that they have to jump over, but it's not an absolute brick wall. And it appears to be a brick wall for other clubs that you feel like are close to taking that step forward. So I think that most GMs, most coaches would have as many 6'2" to 5 defensemen as they could, who are as capable as the Vegas Golden Knights, but that's just impossible to follow up on. But I think that the aggressiveness and the tactics of the Vegas Golden Knights, especially from a management standpoint, aside from the in and out of the coaches that they've gone through, I think other clubs, most recently the Tampa Bay Lightning, have embraced that and have had success with it.
Darren Dreger, our guest here on OverDrive. You're listening to TSN 1050 up on TSN 4. Some other news in the NHL today, Dregs. Jason Spezza, now with Pittsburgh officially. He is an assistant general manager, which I suppose is a promotion from his role as special assistant to the general manager. That's the role he had in Toronto. Do you think that's the end of Pittsburgh and Dubas poaching, I guess not poaching guys from Toronto because Spezza did resign. But
Right.
do you anticipate any other movement in the Pittsburgh front office, and I guess by extension the Toronto front office as well?
I don't think so, AK. But let's see how Pittsburgh intends on building out that management structure, right? If we're talking about guys like Brandon Pridham as an example in Toronto, I don't see it. I just don't. I mean, he's so high valued, such an important piece for the Maple Leafs, and I'm sure that Brad Treliving has already recognized that. Bit more entrenched from a family standpoint here, so I wouldn't think the timing would work. I mean, the least surprising thing that I saw today, and there was a lot of stuff that surprised us, I think, when we went on Twitter earlier today, all kidding aside. That was the least surprising, that Jason Spezza has rejoined Kyle Dubas, because, and I don't mean that, I'm not being sarcastic or critical at all. I admire Spezza. I mean, he's got a sharp hockey mind, and he's honing his skill set in management at a top level. He was joined at the hip with Kyle Dubas in Toronto. And that, again, was made very clear when he resigned shortly after the Leafs made their decision to part ways with Kyle Dubas. Dubas and Spezza, they have a connection. And now this is another opportunity for Jason Spezza to take a closer look at whether or not he wants to be a manager at some point in his NHL career. So you want to surround yourself with people that you trust, and you like their instincts and everything that they bring that maybe can be a little bit outside the box, and maybe Spezza provides that for Dubas.
Dregs, now that we're in the off season, do you think business is going to pick up here as far as trade chatter, all of that fun stuff leading up to the draft?
I would think so, Noodles. I mean, we certainly have evidence of that with the Philadelphia Flyers kind of swirled in the middle of it all with, the trading of Provorov, who lands in Columbus. What I know is there's a ton of talk that's going on, and we can look at, if we want to keep it Canadian for a moment, obviously Calgary got their front office figured out with Ryan Huska recently appointed to the head coaching role. So now Craig Conroy and management can attack what their roster is going to look like. And that's a salary cap mess in Calgary that needs to get figured out. So there's some heavy lifting there required. In Winnipeg, we don't need to go through all of that. We've done that for better than a week now. But you wonder when that's going to kick into full gear. Cheveldayoff is noted as being a very conservative general manager. And that's just the way he likes to do his business. But it does feel like with the draft looming that he'd be wise to get some of that business done sooner rather than later. And, those are two clubs. You look around the National Hockey League, there's all kinds of teams that are kind of jammed up a little bit by the salary cap. But more and more, I'm getting the impression that, we talked about Vegas earlier in the chat here and how aggressive and just fearless McCrimmon and George McPhee have been. I'm getting more of a sense that other managers are willing to do that. They finally figured out a way to make a hockey trade where the dollars also make sense. And that's always been a bit of a hurdle, I would think, if not a large obstruction for many clubs. And it kind of feels like this year it's different. So let's see if the talk actually turns into more than what we've already seen.
Darren, we were talking about Barbashev earlier in the program, who was a free agent. They traded him from the St. Louis Blues. What type of ticket do you think he could get? And our GM's looking at this like he was incredible in their cup run here, but you got to be careful not to overpay a guy for maybe a shorter-term performance.
Well, here's a shocking newsflash for you guys. I'm pretty sure Barbashev wants to stay in Vegas. And I wouldn't call this like a hometown discount because he hasn't been there that long. But I think the number for Barbashev is in the fours. Could be the upper fours. And, then what is the term? You figure that out. That seems affordable to me. And now it's going to be up to Kelly McCrimmon to figure out how to make that work. I mean, McCrimmon wants to be involved and is often involved in everything. I know that he didn't love the idea that Philadelphia traded Provorov, a former Brandon Wheat King, while they were in the playoffs, while they were in the Stanley Cup final, right? He wanted to be part of that because he's constantly trying to improve his team. So, but it has to be addition by subtraction. So if you're adding a $4.5 to $5 million annual average salary, you got to look at their roster and say, okay, well, who's coming out of the mix? And that's where it gets complicated. I heard rumblings about Riley Smith, but I don't know that to be sure. So, I think that there's every scenario, but, Barbashev may look at it from a business standpoint and say, yeah, it's been great. I've won Stanley Cups in St. Louis and now in Vegas, and I'm in a position where the money is going to dictate where I land and then where I end up. So I think that the door is open there, but I do believe that he would prefer to stay in Vegas, and I'd be surprised if Vegas didn't want to hold on to him.
Darren, the news has come out that Hellebuck and Pierre-Luc Dubois have mentioned that they don't want to sign long-term contracts in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
And that's not something that happened when Jamie and myself played. It was kind of like, I do understand it's your career. You've got about 10 years, if you're lucky, to do what you want to do. And I have an appreciation for it, but I also don't like it for some markets because I just like the idea of being happy where you got drafted and kind of sticking with it and just it's the NHL and be happy and blah, blah, blah. I kind of get both sides of it, but how dangerous of a game is this for the players? Like, how far are we going to go here? Like, where players are just like, no, not for me, no thanks.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. And look, I look at Pierre-Luc Dubois a little bit differently. I got all the time in the world for this guy. I mean, we know the player that he is and why so many teams would be interested. French-Canadian, of course, he lines with the Montreal Canadiens. But he wasn't happy in Columbus. And so the deal gets made, and another unhappy player, Patrick Laine, not happy in Winnipeg. He ends up in Columbus. And Jack Roslovic wasn't happy in Winnipeg. He ends up in Columbus. Like, you had these disgruntled players who get a fresh start, and they all more or less make the best of it. And yet here we find Pierre-Luc Dubois again as a restricted free agent. That's different. Like Connor Hellebuck, for me, is a completely separate entity because he's won the Vezina. He's done the things other than hoist the Stanley Cup in Winnipeg. He's given them many of the best years of his career, and he still has lots more to give, but he's giving them full notice. He's going into the final year of his contract, and then he can walk for free. Dubois is different. Winnipeg owns his rights for another year. They own him. So,
but he'll still be treated the same way, Darren. As soon as the Tkachuk situation was, as soon as you let the team know, it's like you're gone.
Yeah, and look, Pat Brisson and CAA are masterful at managing these things. I'm surprised there isn't more public backlash or pushback on stuff like that. Because, hey, what if Winnipeg dug in their heels and said, "No, we're not. We're just not going to do it. We're going to do it on our timeline." Now they can't because it's a diminishing asset, right?
No kidding. It wouldn't be a smart timeline.
No, but you've got a player whose rights you own, and it's one thing for it to be private, for the player to say, "Look, we're just not comfortable signing. We're not going to say anything publicly, but we'd really like to help you find a place where this player can set roots and sign an extension, and by doing that, you get more of a windfall coming back in the return." Instead, it becomes a public matter, and now it feels like the gun is at the head of Kevin Cheveldayoff in the Winnipeg Jets, and that's not what the player would want, and that's certainly not what the agent would want, but here they are, and Cheveldayoff is kind of backed into a corner. The good thing with this is Pierre-Luc Dubois, as I started, is a good player. So whether it's Montreal or there's another opportunity, and it's not just Montreal, this player will consider other teams. They're going to get good value for him. It's just he's a big piece among other big pieces that Winnipeg is going to have to wrestle with.
Well, and I just wonder how much NHL players are looking at the NBA and seeing like, wow, these guys have a lot of power. They decide where they want to go. And again, I have a lot of respect for Pierre-Luc Dubois. He's a really good player, but the fact that he's controlling the situation with Winnipeg, I mean, it says a lot about where the game is going as far as free agency goes. And there's a term that is ubiquitous in the NBA. It's called pre-agency, right? Where free agent doesn't exist anymore because you're doing it a year out, 2 years out. You're making the call on your future years ahead. And for the NHL. I mean, it's good for the insider business, I suppose, Darren. You got a lot of stuff to talk about. But I think it's pretty clear that Tkachuk, I guess Jack Eichel to some extent with Buffalo, and now Dubois and Hellebuck, they're kind of making their own call right now.
Yeah, but there is a similarity, right? And it's top players are doing that, AK, right? You're not talking about fringe NBA players whose contracts are a year out and they're unhappy for the most part, right? Because those aren't headline grabbers and they're not moving the needle and they're not putting any pressure on management. And I think that's where the similarity lies with what we're seeing now in the National Hockey League with some of these, better, if not top-end RFAs kind of driving the bus. But you're in a situation, if you're Winnipeg, like, what did Pierre-Luc Dubois do for the Winnipeg Jets last year when it mattered in the second half? Like, he was okay, all kidding aside. So, if you're Winnipeg, are you saying, all right, well, he doesn't want to stay, but maybe we can try and financially convince him to stay and load up the money truck and let's see if he'll take that? No. I think they realize that, he's a good player, but we'll just get the maximum asset in return and move on, and hopefully it works out best for both sides.
He doesn't care about the money truck. He just gets it at the other place he wants to go to.
Well, that'll be part of the deal, right? Like that'll be part of the transaction. He's likely not going to Montreal or wherever he's going unless a contract extension has already been worked out.
Well, what about a contract extension for Phil Kessel, the three-time Cup winner?
Does he pack it in, Dregs, or what?
I mean, you never say never with Phil, right? It kind of looked like he probably will, but I say that, and then I remember when Phil Kessel, landed on the scene there, and he was slim and he was trim, and he looked like he was in the best shape of his life. I liked what Mark Stone said about Phil Kessel last night, right, post-game, and how the wily old veteran, we all have Phil Kessel stories that are mostly humorous, but the guy's been a tremendous secondary player, and for him to accept the role that he had to embrace in the playoffs of being a black ace and coming to work every day and working as hard as he did and being acknowledged by his captain and whatnot, that tells me a lot about Phil Kessel. So I also love the jab at Toronto. It wasn't a jab at the Toronto Maple Leafs. It was a jab at Toronto media. That's what the jab was. And it was perfectly placed and well executed by Phil Kessel. Here I am. I got 3 Stanley Cups.
I loved it.
It was great. You may as well just shut it out, Dave Feschuk from the Toronto Star. I would have enjoyed that. I always enjoy chatting with you, Darren. Thank you for doing this, and I'll speak with you on Friday morning, buddy.
Yeah, we'll see if I'm available, but we'll work it out.
All right.
Have a good one, fellas.
TSN Hockey insider Darren Dreger joined us on the Maple Toyota hotline. Build your next dream Toyota at Maple Toyota, and check out Maple Toyota's pre-owned inventory arriving daily. It's time to Toyota. Visit mapletoyota.com. It's almost time to play some role play level of concern. We'll do that on the other side. Keegan Matheson still to come, and Dan Rappaport ahead of the U.S. Open beginning tomorrow from L.A. Country Club. Overdrive, Hour 2 continues. TSN 4, TSN 1050, and on the TSN app.
You can never ask me to stop drinking. Do you understand?
I do. I really do.
We're back on Overdrive. I think there's probably some people watching and listening who are Nick Cage level of concerns about Brian Hayes' status, considering some of the news today at TSN Bell Media. He's good. Brian will be back on Monday. This is Level of Concern, a staple segment here on Overdrive. A pretty simple premise, fellas.
Yep.
I ask you to play the role of a person or a team in the world of sports, and you have to determine just how concerned you are. Maybe a pint on the patio, or it could go to Nick Cage. Noodles, we're going to start with you here on Roleplay Level of Concern. You are Kevin Cheveldayoff, the GM of the Winnipeg Jets. What is your level of concern that you have to start a full-scale rebuild this summer?
Play it right now.
You can never asked me to stop drinking.
Now, I would say it would be Rick Bushwood, which, you can throw
It's
Rick.
another solid.
Give me a Rick Bushwood.
6 Bush Light, 6 Bud Light, and I love them, tall boys.
Okay, so that guy too. Here's why I'm not Rick Bushwood. Because I still believe they've got a ton of talent there. Perfetti, you got Kyle Connor, you got Nikolai Ehlers. You've got Blake Wheeler there. You're not going to be able to do anything with a 37-year-old that's got another year on his deal. But it's more about the spine of your team. Like if I'm looking at a Vezina caliber goaltender, and I'm looking at a young number one centerman in Pierre-Luc Dubois, that's a spicy meatball. And both of them are saying, like, we're not signing, extensions here, potentially. That's Nick Cage. Because what do? You got to, unless you get them back in trades for younger people, which you're not getting a younger number one centerman. I don't know if there is one. Right
well, it's
now.
the Calgary move, right? Like Kachuk wanted out. All right, we can get Huberdeau and Weegar back, and we're good. But who
guys,
is
I got to be honest. I'm actually not a little. I'm concerned about the Canadian markets in the next 10 years. We saw it last year with Calgary. We saw it in Winnipeg. Ottawa guys, they seem like they have a bunch of good players there that enjoy being in Ottawa, which is fantastic. Who knows what could change? But if this gets into a scenario where it's about taxes and sunshine and Vegas and Tampa and Florida, and it's the haves and have-nots, it's going to be tough sledding. And I hope it doesn't get to that. But you've already seen two examples where guys are like, check, please. I want to go to Florida. Maybe I want to go to Montreal. It's tough. I hate seeing it, but I'm concerned what's going to happen for the Canadian markets in the next 10 years.
You know what you got to do, though? Build a winner, and people want a piece of it. Like Edmonton, I'm from Edmonton. I grew up there. It's not for everybody, let's be honest. But they got the Golden Goose there. If somebody, you want to go play with the Golden Goose and get an opportunity?
How could you not want to?
Exactly. But they've got to build teams that at least contend. John Tavares came home. Yeah, you can argue with
But Jamie, the counter argument is Winnipeg saying, well, we traded for this young stud centerman and we get him here. We trade one of our other young studs for him, and then he gets here and doesn't want to be here either.
Yeah, I get that. It's unfortunate. There are markets that aren't as desirable. And you played in Carolina. It's not for everybody as far as sexiness on the map, but man, it's a great area. You can golf in that. Winnipeg, I say this all the time. Edmonton, you got to pay cold weather tax. But you got to add to that because is it an unrestricted free agent haven to go there? And there's times where it's minus 40 out.
Well, I also wonder.
I got to tell you, Jamie, I like Edmonton a lot.
I've
spent a lot of time there in the World Juniors, covering the World Juniors. I'll tell you one thing, though. Me and my wife went out to dinner at Joey's in downtown Edmonton.
Yeah.
She took a picture of my face when I walked to the Westin, which was 3 blocks away. The snot in my nose and my eyebrows, the water in my eyes all froze up in 4 seconds.
Wow.
Couldn't even go outside for a dart. Guys that went outside for darts were like, they should be in the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Yeah, their hands had to get amputated.
It was I was like, holy crap. And the locals are just walking around like, what's wrong with it? It's like nothing. I don't know how you could, like, it was, people were like, the lady at the hotel was like, there's an outdoor skating festival. You and your wife should go check that out. And I said, pardon me? I go, you want us to go ice skating in that? We'll die. She's like, no way.
It's funny.
The kids are out there playing hot. I'm like, oh my word.
You go to Vegas in August or July. It's like 40 degrees of desert heat.
1,000.
It's disgusting outside. It's the exact opposite of what Edmonton is in the middle of December.
And Winnipeg too.
Yeah.
There were, I believe it wasn't that long ago. I remember somebody sending this where Winnipeg was the coldest place on earth.
Pierre-Luc Dubois.
It was a polar vortex.
That day, it was something insane. That being said, I like those markets, but it's just not for everybody. And that's what you've got to be mindful for. If you're trading for somebody that goes, you know what, I may not love that situation. I've said this, and I'm not trying to start anything, but Austin Matthews is an American kid. What if he meets a girl from L.A. or meets a girl from New York City? And she's like we said, Jacob Trouba, his wife is a doctor and wanted to do her residency in the States. Like sometimes your life takes over too, where it's like, Okay, we want to go here. We want to go there. It's a coin flip sometimes.
There's a lot of challenges, and I think the rising salary cap probably isn't going to help Canadian teams either, considering the tax that these players are going to pay on these escalating salaries. That's got to factor in too. Oh, I think you might be onto something. You, my friend, are Scotty Scheffler. What is your level of concern that the putter will be your downfall this weekend at LA Country Club for the U.S. Open?
I'm Rick Bushwood.
Six Bush Light, 6 Bud Light, and I love them, tall boys.
Because he's such a good player. It was like one of his last tournaments. I don't recall which one. But like tee to green, it was like one of the most impressive performances ever registered on tour. And he can't putt. Like, he legitimately can't putt. But you would think with the coaching available and, I don't know, maybe get some kind of different wand. That's this whole game for these guys, AK. Like, they all strike it like gods. It's just whose putter gets hot. You saw it with Dustin Johnson a couple of years ago. He was rolling in everything. John Rahm rolling in everything. JT, Jordan Spieth. Who can get the putter hot? I think he's going to turn it around, but it's got to be a little concern. They just showed him on the range practicing, and it was like an 8-footer. He had 3 balls, and he missed all of them on the green. I was like, man, get another putter.
Well, this and that is the report. We'll talk to Dan Rappaport about that he may be debuting a new putter this week at the U.S. Open.
I know, but it'll be the same model with a different initial on
he
it.
legitimately is, and this is not hyperbole. He is Tiger Woods from tee to green. He just cannot putt at all.
Well, let me ask you guys this. Is he one of those guys who's like stubborn with his putter? Like, there's certain guys that we played with, like, that love this certain stick. And, like, if you had a better stick, you could shoot the puck harder. Like, it's almost like rolling up to a road hockey game and there's a guy with a toothpick.
Yeah.
Like, there's
I played with some crazy guys, too, though, Noodles. Like Rod Brindamore, if he had a bad game next practice, he had, like, that little saw on the blade, and he'd be, like, edging off a bit of the toe, and then the next day. Like, guys are crazy, but Scotty Scheffler is just like, this is going to come around. I'm not changing putters.
Well, and if he is average on the greens this week, he will win by 5 shots. But he has been so bad with the flat stick that it makes it tough to bet on him. Again, we'll talk to Dan Rappaport a little bit later. Next, I am Darko Rajokovic, the new head coach of the Toronto Raptors. What is the level of concern that you will be coaching a young, rebuilding team? Now, for me, I think this is a couple of White Claws on a nice sunny day at Trinity Bellwoods Park. Not a high level of concern at all.
You do that?
But, I love that. It's a fantastic afternoon. Oh, you should come by, hang out with me and my boys. They all love you. You can come and hang out at White Claws, Trinity Bellwoods.
So you tell your buddies, grab the claws and go to Bellwood Park, and you sit on a blanket, and you have beers or drinks or what?
Pretty much it. Yeah, play some spike ball. We have ourselves a time. Throw around the football. It's a very scenic afternoon after a round of golf.
What happened to like going to a Dungy pub and just pounding beers on like
that's the nighttime activity.
Is that not cool anymore to
do? Dungy
that
pub?
used to be like a sport for me. Like I was really good at it and I loved doing it.
Yes.
But I guess you go to a park now.
Well, you do. It's a good time. So for Darko, I'm not concerned about it at all. Bobby Webster, the GM of the Raps, was on First Up this morning with Kaz and Koliakovo. They were talking about it, and Bobby's like, we want all these guys back. Van Vliet, Gary Trent, Jakob Poeltl, Siakam signed, and of course OG Anunoby signed. Like, I don't see Masai Ujiri and the Raptors moving into this full-scale rebuild. That's not how these guys operate. They talk about winning and winning.
How can they continue to say, like, and Vegas is an extreme example. I mean, they were so aggressive in getting players, and if they didn't pull this off, we'd be saying, that's borderline reckless behavior. It is reckless behavior because it didn't pay off. So that's it's fresh in your mind and you win, AK. But on the other hand, how can the Raptors keep kind of committing? And the Leafs are the same way. It's like, no, our guys love them coming back. It's like, why?
I agree. Like I'm surprised you're like 2 White Claws. I would have at least been Rick Bushwood for sure, because you can say whatever you want, and maybe Kaz and Carlo got something out of him, but he could also be lying and going, we're going to blow this thing up.
You can't believe anything anybody says.
But that's what I'm saying. Is like, in his mind, all I could think of, and we had Darko on yesterday, like, and Hayes asked him, what type of team do you think? Well, we're going to be competitive. I don't even know what competitive means.
What does that mean?
Exactly.
Are they competitive now? Were they competitive last year?
Right. So I think they're going to take it either down to the wood or reshape. Do something with Fred maybe and bring somebody in. But they need, is there a 1 on their team? Like Siakam's not a
there's
1.
No, he's
right?
like a decent 2, but Van Vliet could go somewhere else. He's going to be a free agent. He could be like, hey, I'll go to Philadelphia. I'll go to
sign
Houston.
sign and trade. But I still think they're going down to the wood before they kind of go back up. But that's just me.
Noodles, you are Pierre Dorion, the general manager of the Ottawa Senators. What is your level of concern that the new owner in Ottawa wants to hire his own GM?
I'd be Rick Bushwood.
6 Bush Light, 6 Bud Light, and I love them, tall
high
boys.
concern
But here's my thing though, is Pierre's done a really good job with kind of a more skeleton crew. Like basically, like there was a time there where I don't know if his hands were tied or not. They've drafted, they developed, they've traded, and they've got all their core locked up moving forward. Like if I'm the new owner, do you come in immediately with your new people, or do you come in with new people and go, who do we have here? Let's assess the whole organization. I think that's what Brad Treliving's doing right now. Brad Treliving is probably assessing what he has throughout the organization and then going to put a stamp of approval on it.
Weird dynamic, Jamie, as far as timing, too, because I don't think the sale becomes official until August, possibly, maybe even September, like the official.
Yeah.
So it's like we're talking big moments in the structure of an NHL calendar with the draft, free agency, and I just don't know the dynamic, how it works, where it's like he's not hands-on until the sale's official or what, but there's a lot of big things for an organization where if you were going to make a move, it would be pretty critical that things would need to be done before that stuff happened.
I agree. I think it's and if you know he's the guy, you would imagine that Pierre Dorion would be in touch with him saying, hey, this is the direction I'm heading, almost doing like a job interview before he takes over the team, right? But I think Pierre's done a good job there. They bottomed out. They're headed in the right direction. They've got some moves to make. Be interesting to see if Andlauer, gives a green light to, kind of spend to the cap, to do everything.
Jamie, if I was an executive, I would send Andlauer a very short text. It would be a thumb up emoji and then O-R, or a thumb down emoji. Just respond to that.
Like, am I in? Like,
am I in or am I out? Pick one.
Kind of like a you up type of thing?
I think that could be
thumbs
it.
up or thumbs down. Gas me or am I alive?
Well, we did see with the Phoenix Suns when they had their new owner brought in, Matt Ishbia. Like, he came in and traded for Kevin Durant as his first order of business. Oh, yeah, we'll blow all our first-round picks and young players. We want Durant. Then they fire the coach. I mean, sometimes new ownership, they come in and they want to make a statement. Sometimes it's not the case.
Yeah.
I guess we'll have to see what Andlauer, which way he leans.
I think they've got the framework of a good team there, though.
Jeff, you are the Florida Panthers. What is your level of concern that the team's competitive window is closing fast?
What the hell are you talking about, the competitive window? They went to the Stanley Cup Finals for the first time since the 90s. Like, you got Matthew Tkachuk. He's a young guy. Barkov's not that old. Bob, who God knows what he's going to be. Ekblad's not that old. Lundell's young. The other Finn is young up front. Like, they've got the pieces there to be pretty good. I'm sure they're going to have to look at that, and everybody's got decisions to make as far as UFAs. The Stahl brothers, I think both of them are done as far as their contracts. So they can keep working with that. The difficult thing is, with everything always evolving and changing, it's like, was that a shot in the dark, or is this something that we can make a couple more runs at this in the future? And that's why Bill Zito gets paid big bucks to make that decision. Like, he made that one drastic change to Tkachuk. Like, is this something that's going to be a regular occurrence? Because I got to tell you, I only went to the finals once, and there wasn't a whole lot of that nonsense happening after that. You know what I mean? It was like, there was your one time, and the Cinderella never gets it done, so what the hell are you going to do with your team afterwards?
Well, yeah, I agree. I'm concerned about the injuries moving forward, but I did say this, and I've got to be consistent. So, AK, yesterday I said, like, they had 92 points this past season. I can see them having a better regular season next year.
Ton of injuries
but Paul
last year.
Maurice already planted the seed. He's like, we're going to suck next year. We got guys that are having surgery that are going to be out 4 to 6 months.
Brandon Montour announced, I think it was Kevin Weeks who came out and said he's got a messed up shoulder. He's out at least 3 months. And we know
3 months,
Chuck
4
and
months.
Gudis.
They're just next year might be a year, like, just through injuries where you might have to look at it and say, might be a step back because we have no choice.
Well, it'd be interesting. I think Gudas is unrestricted. Like, do you think that guy gets a little paid?
There's the perfect example of a situation where it was like, did we get some of the best hockey that he had left in him, or are we going to try to sign this guy for 3 or 4 years and not see anything close to that moving forward? That's where it's like that's why you get paid, to make those decisions.
You do, but here's the he's 33. So I think that's a 4-year deal for somebody. But he plays hard. He plays for keeps.
Listen, I would not want to be going up against Radko Gudas in the postseason. It's just a matter of, he gets 35, 36, loses a step, and all of a sudden he's a guy who's hurting you as opposed to helping you.
He was a perfect third pairing guy for that right side. Like, think of it. Ekblad, Montour, Gudas. That's a hell of a right side. Like there's a reason why they could let Mackenzie Weegar go, even though Weegar played the left side as a right shot. Now their left side, I think, Mark Stahl is a guy I believe is unrestricted. He is at 36. So they're going to have to retool here pretty quick. Like, they have some guys under contract. They've got a couple of young guys that are, RFAs, but ultimately you got to sort out what you're going to do moving forward. Like, that's why I say you lose out in the cup yesterday. It's Bill Zito's working today. He's got to figure out what he's doing for next season. So it's crazy. No time for these managers.
Yeah, hopefully Kelly McCrimmon, George McPhee take a couple of days off to celebrate. Those guys deserve it.
What is it? What's the strip club that gave them Ulta?
Oh, yeah,
Lifetime?
There was that strip club.
It's Larry Flint's Hustler. No, it was Hustler.
It wasn't the Rhino.
It was Larry Flint's Hustler. I think the lifetime lap dances for that group.
You think they're happy? You think anyone actually goes in like, hey, I'm here for the lap dance?
I'm just thinking.
I play for Vegas.
20 years from now, Ben Hutton's trying to get in there. He played 35 games for them in the regular season. He's got some card.
He's got some VIP card to walk into whatever strip club.
A mullet and a cane, and he just throws out the NHLPA card.
Yeah, that's it.
I love it.
That's it. That's an interesting storyline we'll track over the coming days. Keegan Matheson, MLB.com. He's coming up in about 20 minutes. Jays and O's Game 2. And Daniel Rappaport on the grounds at LA Country Club. I'm not sure if you guys know what's going on next to the 14th hole of LACC, but if you don't, I'll tell you about it next. Keegan Matheson and Dan Rappaport coming up in the third hour of Overdrive. We'll talk about the U.S. Open, what goes on at the 14th hole or just outside the gates on the 14th hole. I'll fill you in on that in about 8 minutes' time. But the big story in the NBA today has to do with Bradley Beal, who apparently is working with his team, the Washington Wizards, on a trade. Now, keep in mind, Bradley Beal is on a 5-year, $250 million contract. It's not worth anywhere near it. In fact, in his age 35 season, he's making $55 million. $55 million.
How old is he right now?
I think he's like 31-ish, maybe a little bit older than that, Arad. But in any case, I mean, Bradley Beal, that's one of those situations where it's like, oh, yeah, like we're going to work with the team. Every NBA GM's like, nah, I'm good. I don't really want to be paying an old man in the NBA 55 sheets a year to probably be ineffective. I mean, that's how it's going to work. Like Damian Lillard, for instance, is making $60 million a year in his age 36 season. The NBA is trending in a direction where these players are going to be making ungodly sums of money. And so teams are like, hey, can we get rid of this deal quickly before it cashes in?
Both of those players you just mentioned. So where's Beal going? And I've heard talks that Dame is actually going to get out of Portland this year. Is that true?
Well, I mean, now there's reports that they want to trade the number 3 overall pick to bring somebody in alongside him when they see this window. But, I mean, the NBA is in a really weird spot. I know you guys had Brian Windhorst early on this week where he was talking about the second apron of the salary cap, which is very complicated, but basically it eliminates crazy spending for players. Like we saw Golden State, and you can't be paying Brad Beal $50 million a year and expect to be a successful basketball team anymore.
50 sheets. That's unbelievable. And that's the second tier type of thing.
Exactly. The guys like Giannis and Steph Curry, they'll be making
Sam
70.
Sam Mitchell said it best. He's like, we got to start figuring out a system where we pay guys for wins.
Yeah, that's true.
We pay guys for wins.
Yeah.
Because he's like, at the end of the day, that's all that matters, and it never works out like that.
We'll talk to Keegan Matheson on the other side, and I will fill you in on LA Country Club, what goes on there, and a very significant celebrity who was denied membership to the golf course. You'll be stunned who it is. I'll tell you next.